Well, welcome everyone. Appreciate you being with us again this afternoon. This is our formal pre-submission meeting as part of MACOG's Level 3 CFI, or Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Request for Proposals. Some of you are familiar to this project if you've attended our two previous pre-proposal meetings before we released the RFP. We had two separate virtual meetings in the month of August to introduce you to the concept of MACOG's procurement strategy, the project, our locations, just to give you that extra month of time to be prepared for this procurement coming out. It's now since been released and will be due on November 1st. So we appreciate each of you being here, asking good questions throughout this process. This will be an opportunity to continue to ask those questions and help us refine your responses so that we're getting the information that we need to evaluate proposals. My name is Leah Thill. I'm the Director of Sustainability with MACOG. And second here, there we go. Just wanted to recap our charging and fueling infrastructure project goals. Our goals are to fill gaps in the electric vehicle infrastructure in our rural and urban disadvantaged areas, and to not replace, but to complement where the private market is investing in electric vehicle charging, so that it is reliable, accessible, and promotes safety for vehicles and for people. As an overview, if this is the first meeting of our three pre-proposal and pre-submission meetings that we have held on our CFI procurement. MACOG stands for the Michiana Area Council of Governments. We are a regional planning organization that covers 4 counties shown in this picture here in northern Indiana: St. Joseph, Elkhart, Marshall, and Kosciuszko. And we have a couple alternative fuel corridors that run through our region, including US 31, I-8090, the toll road, and most recently US 30, which passes through our two more rural counties, through Plymouth and through Warsaw. The purpose of today's meeting, as I mentioned, is to respond to the questions we received in advance about this RFP, and this is an opportunity to ask additional questions. You may raise your hand or put a question in the chat, and we might integrate it into this presentation, or we might ask that we respond at the end of the presentation, depending on whether the material we're about to cover addresses that question. And again, if you just joined, please introduce yourself in the chat. This gives folks an opportunity to connect if there's an interest in partnering together on an application, as well as to connect with DBEs. We're also inviting people. This is very optional. It doesn't affect your ability to submit a proposal. It doesn't affect the scoring of the proposals. The purpose of responding to this survey, this intent to respond, is more to publish a list of those who are intending to respond, so that if there are DBEs who are seeking a prime, or there's a prime applicant that's seeking DBEs, it's a public forum to be able to connect and form that partnership. We've been getting some questions from you all. Where can I find a published list of those who are responding? So we are going, now that you've had a couple weeks to review the proposal and think more carefully about the requirements, if you're ready, if you've decided that you think you will respond, we invite you to fill this out. You can also choose not to have your information publicly posted if you just want to let us know. Personally, I don't really care to know how many people or who's responding, because you could always decide that you don't want to submit an application. But the purpose is just to have that public list so you all can use it to determine who to partner with together. So that's the purpose of this. Again, it does not at all affect the scoring or your ability to submit an application according to everything set out in the RFP. So there's the QR code as well as the link there on the screen, and Kelsey will be posting that in the chat. We also had an exciting development in the last month. We've published our new project webpage. This consolidates and pulls together all the different updates and meetings and documents into one project webpage where you can stay up to date and access anything that you might need. So there's no need to email me. If you read through the communications section of the RFP, we ask that I not be contacted, or other members of the MACOG staff not be contacted during this time. And we had asked that all questions be referred to our MACOG DIR email address. But if you're looking for an update, anything that I have publicly available, it will be posted on this webpage. So that can be your first stop shop for any project updates that you may be seeking. Again, Kelsey will be posting the link to that project webpage in the chat, and you can scan it with your phone as well. Other important updates that have occurred since the last time we held one of the pre-proposal meetings in the end of August. We have a central, or on the Central Engage website, we have now the recordings and slides posted, as well as a list of attendees who attended those first two meetings, if you care to reach out or connect with anyone. And then again, the RFP that you all are aware of has been posted there with a new addendum from the South Bend International Airport site visit, which occurred on September 17th. So definitely check out that addendum. It's in Q&A format from that site visit and includes some new information if you're interested in proposing to apply for that airport location. So definitely don't want to miss that information, and I'll go through it a little bit during this call. Here's a quick overview of some of the information you can find on that Engage website. You can find important procurement deadlines. There's a document library. The Zoom link and information for this meeting was on there, and future opportunities will be posted for future procurements. And then there's sort of the high-level overview of level 2 and level 3 procurement. We've received some additional questions about level 2, which we will not be covering in today's meeting, but this is the sequencing that we're anticipating through the end of the CFI project. Here's where we're at in terms of important dates with today's pre-submission meeting. The next important deadline is the November 1st RFP submission deadline. And then we will be notifying finalists about 2 weeks after that point. And do keep in mind that finalist interviews would be scheduled on November 20th. So if you intend to apply, please keep that date in mind and keep that available. Again, please refrain from emailing or calling me during this time when the RFP is open. If you had need to contact MACOG regarding the RFP, the email address, the MACOG DIR email address is listed here, but we won't be accepting any further substantive questions after this meeting unless there's some technical error or some mistake that needs to be corrected in the RFP. Another piece of information that's new is the level 2 site host application that's now live. It's maybe perhaps not as relevant to those of you on the call, but if you know of any local businesses, schools, libraries, both public and private entities can apply to be a site host for level 2. Those decisions will be made by mid-November, and then we will move towards procurement for our level 2 projects at the end of this year and early next year. The application will be due on October 14th, so that's coming up in a couple weeks. All right. That ends kind of the updates. Just wanted to recap the basic concept of the level 3 RFP. There are 3 locations. 2 will be along US 30, 1 will be near Plymouth, and 1 will be near Warsaw. The 3rd location is at the South Bend International Airport. Importantly, we are asking respondents to propose locations on US 30. We received some questions that were asking for details about the US 30 locations, but those have not been predefined. The South Bend International Airport has been predefined, and that location with the site visit has already occurred, but please refer to the addendum for additional information on that. Also want to clarify that we are proposing that contractors will own and operate all of the level 3 locations, all 3 of those, and that MACOG will not be owning the stations. That's important for the federal tax credit requirements, and I'll go through that in a moment. But just wanted you all to get a chance to see again the high-level overview of the level 3 projects that are part of this RFP. Here's a closer look at the South Bend International Airport location. It is proposed to be located to the south along Lincoln Way West near US 31, which is an alternative fuel corridor. It's about 2 miles from that interchange. And it is not located immediately adjacent to the terminal. There are a couple of reasons for that. One being that the CFI program does not permit there to be paid parking for any of these stations, and parking is paid parking close to the terminal. The other is just for easy, convenient access from local roads in US 31 for those who may or may not be accessing the station for the purposes of using the airport or using the South Shore Line train there. The car wash where this is located adjacent to it, it's going to be a private car wash that car rental companies will be utilizing. And the strategic reason for the airport requesting this co-location of the 2 is that the car rental companies had been requesting electric vehicle charging amenities. And so this achieves that goal while also providing potentially some built-in utilization of the station by those companies as well. So that's additional information on that siting. also wanted to recap again what we shared in the last meeting about the corridors for the Plymouth and Warsaw locations. The US 30 segments are not hard and fast, but we're pretty confident this will capture any of the locations that might be proposed. The two locations along US 30 would be one near Plymouth, within 1 mile of US 30, adjacent to the corridor segment listed here. That is Pioneer Drive in the west and 9A King Road to the east, on either side of US 31. And then for the site near Warsaw, that would be within 1 mile of US 30 from North 200 West in the west to Indiana State Road 13, which is near Pierceton to the east. So those are the two segments to keep an eye on, and then measure the 1 mile from the nearest access point to US 30 in those segments. Let's see. Sounds like someone is not muted. If Kelsey, you want to check on that. But I did want to share, before we dive into the specific questions, just some pictures from the site visit that we took at the South Bend International Airport. If you were not local, we understand that attending that in person may have been challenging, so wanted to share. On the left is what the transformer pad, where the transformer pad will go. The transformer pad shown is where the transformer is serving the car wash facility, where it will be added, and then just a little bit farther towards that truck is an additional area where a second transformer pad would be added through this project. And just wanted to give you an idea of how that's located within the fence, and then how close that fence is located to the proposed parking area, which is shown as the second picture on the right. The parking lot would, as shown in the diagram included in the RFP, butt up right against this fence. And the transformer is really pretty closely located to that parking location. Okay, now I'm going to segue into a discussion of questions submitted in advance. So I am going to stop my screen sharing here while I pull that up, so we can have more of a conversation as we go. Again, I'm seeing a lot of people introducing yourself, but if you hadn't had a chance to do that, please do if you wish to. Please then also respond. It doesn't have to be now, it can be after the meeting, to the survey of intent to respond, which is optional, in addition to sharing your information, your contact information. So let's dive in. Actually, first, we do have a couple other folks from MACOG that are here and may be able to assist in answering questions, are mostly in a listening capacity. But I want you all to know that our Executive Director, James Turnwald, is on the call. James says hi, as well as our Clean Transportation Fellow and AmeriCorps member, Kelsey Trebold, very important part of our team here. So Kelsey's here as well. And our, let's see who else is here. Oh, Carla, our procurement expert, is in the house. So thanks, Carla. She keeps things running smoothly, and always appreciate her help. So here we go. So first question is more on application access. Folks are wondering if we can share the CFI application. Based on that request, we will share it, and we will link to it in our written addendum to the RFP that we will upload after this meeting. So you'll be able to get access to that application. The budget details will be included both for level 2 and level 3, so you can see how we estimated the total project costs, but that does not need to duplicate, but that doesn't need to exactly match project costs or budgets that are proposed. We would like to see what the project costs actually are in the real world, compared to how we estimated this a year and a half ago, I believe. So we will provide that budget. Let's see, if a respondent applies for more than 3 sites, which I think this question's a little confused, because there are only 3 sites that can be responded to. But the question is, if a respondent applies for more than 3 sites, will the maximum award remain the $893,362 total, or will it be awarded per site? I think what this question is getting at is, if you apply for 1 site or 2 or 3 sites, are you splitting the nearly $900,000 between sites? No, it's actually that each site would be awarded the full amount, up to the $893,000 per site. So you are not penalized by applying for multiple sites. So hopefully that clarifies that question. Another question we received is, does MACOG have a preference for revenue share percentages? I don't have a lot of detail on this question, but I assume this to be asking about the percent revenue that MACOG would require contractually as part of the agreement with the contractor. We do not have a preference. You are welcome to propose revenue share percentages, but we do not have a minimum or any specific requirement in mind, if that's something you'd like to include in your proposal. Any questions so far on those easier, simpler responses? Check the chat here. I don't see any hands raised. The next one, there might be more interaction and input from you all, which we do welcome. We received a question on bond requirements for the projects. Question is, can we get full clarification on the bond requirements for these projects? Are there any bond requirements with the submission of the RFP? We would refer to the RFP's requirement regarding financial surety and providing proof that that will be able to be secured. So in our written documentation, we'll follow up outlining that. But the important piece is that MACOG intends to follow the bond requirements stipulated by INDOT in their NEVI contracts, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program that the state is rolling out. We have received recently a copy of the final NEVI contracts, which includes those bond requirements. It's pretty simply a performance and payment bond that are covering the total project cost that's estimated, and then a 10% O&M bond that would cover the decommissioning and any other issues related to that if there was some termination of the agreement or bankruptcy, et cetera. So those are the three pieces that INDOT has, and we will be sharing that in writing so that you all have access to that. We are proposing that we follow the same because we are adhering as closely to what INDOT is doing as possible so that our program is in alignment. And if there are any comments on that or questions, we can take your questions and do some more research as we're evaluating what INDOT's requiring, as well as perhaps what other states might be requiring if that's different in their NEVI contracts. So are there any comments, questions, helpful feedback, or context anyone would like to offer on bond requirements? We had a little bit of that during the site visit, but not a very robust discussion. As you continue to think about bond requirements, I'll move on to the next one, but you can raise your hand if you'd like, or put in the chat if you have feedback on bond requirements based on other states you may be working in, other NEVI programs or other CFI programs. Next question is regarding the ownership model for the level 3 projects. Can we get clarification if MACOG expects an owner-operator business model from the proposer? I think this is asking if the contractor would own and operate the stations. The answer is yes, the contractor would be the owner. No, MACOG would not be the owner. The contractor could operate the station or partner with a third party to operate and maintain the stations. Whatever you propose, you could also be the site host and the owner and the operator, or partner with a third party site host. That is all up to assembling the proposal that you think is the strongest and has the best outcomes for the project goals that we have. But the ownership piece is important because that gets into the federal tax credit eligibility and who gets to take the federal tax credit if the location is eligible. I spelled that out a little bit in the responses to the South Bend International Airport site visit. And what we listed in that addendum is that that census tract that the airport is located within is identified as being not an urban area, and so it is eligible for that tax credit of 6% or up to 30%, depending on certain criteria, prevailing wage, apprenticeship, et cetera. And so I presume that MACOG would not be pursuing that tax credit. That would be up to the owner or up to the contractor to file for that and receive the benefits of that tax credit. So you might, incorporate that into your proposal, and hopefully that's helpful clarification. But the location you choose on US 30, you would want to check whether that is eligible for the federal tax credit, since there are geographic requirements now regarding rural areas and non-urban disadvantaged, or non-urban, urban low-income census tracts and non-urban census tracts. You would want to confirm that. Let's see. Site design, next question. Does MACOG have a target number of ports to be installed at each location beyond the minimum 4 ports mandated by the CFI program? I don't think this is intended to mean by the NEVI program, because we are following the NEVI requirements. The CFI program requirements are a little bit different, but we are requiring NEVI compliance with all 3 of our stations in terms of 4 ports that can simultaneously provide 150 kW minimum. We do not have a preference. We do have some points for future proofing, but future proofing does not necessarily mean that more than 4 ports would go live on a certain timeline, just that perhaps the electrical, the utility supply side upgrades would be put in place, or the transformer sizing would account for maybe future higher power delivery. We will be scoring that, but there's not a preference that we have that there'd be a certain number of ports beyond the minimum of 4 at any particular location. Originally, we did not consider that anyone would propose more than 4 at the airport, but based on the site visit, we are open to that. And I'll be getting into that a little bit later on the site-specific questions for the airport. Any questions, comments so far on anything? We have a question in the chat that says, may we apply for both level 2 and level 3? Absolutely. Applying for level 3 projects through this RFP, I would not affect your ability to apply for level 2 related procurements, whether that's preliminary engineering and design, hardware, or the construction of those stations. There's a follow-up question. Would starting the process to get approved for level 2 mean we no longer get approved for level 3? No. Again, that's kind of the same answer to a similar question. The 2 we see as being fundamentally separate. I don't know, James, if you see that as that answer.
No, there's no problem pursuing both the level 2 and level 3. Essentially, they're just on different tracks right now, because we recognize that, especially with the level 3s, that there are a lot of lead times on certain elements that Leah can expound upon. But because of those lead times, we wanted to get the level 3s out there as quickly as possible. And we realize that there are different vendors who might be interested in level 2 only, different vendors who might be interested in level 3 only. And then there's going to be some crossover of folks who are interested in both. So if you respond to one, you're not disqualified from responding to the other. They're just on different lead times to provide us with hopefully the most competitive proposals.
Yep. And actually, if you look at our CFI application, what we're doing now, we've actually flipped the timelines. We're going to get level 2 moving and then circle back to level 3, but we really felt like, because of those transformer supply chain related issues, we really needed to get level 3 moving more quickly, and because of the transformational nature of having US 30 served by level 3 as well as the airport. So we flipped that timeline, so it no longer reflects exactly what was in our CFI application. I got a clarifying question in the chat that is asking, the questions that we've been discussing about level 2 and level 3 are about a site host. So can a site host apply for level 3 and fill out the application for level 2? Yeah, same answer, but the question is a little different than I understood it. The distinction between level 2 and level 3 fundamentally is that MACOG will not own level 3 stations, the contractor will, and MACOG will own all level 2 stations. The site host will not. Those who we contract with to procure the hardware or install the stations will not then become the owners. So that's a big difference between how level 2 and level 3 is structured. Let's see. Another question was, South Bend International Airport was identified as a site host already by MACOG, which is correct. Would the other 2 sites need to be identified by the responding prime? Absolutely. that is the case, that we are asking the respondents to bring us locations for US 30, find site hosts, engage with them, get at least some affirmative, it doesn't have to be a site host agreement, but commitment to them that if selected, they would be cooperative in signing a site host agreement with the South International Airport. That is the site host, and the location's already been identified. When you look at the scoring criteria, there are some questions that are not applicable for the airport because we identified the location. So it's fixed in that way in terms of the distance from US 31, et cetera. All right, looks like, where are we at? So there was a question about providing more detail on the location of level 3 chargers and the location along US 30 that we received in advance. And I just will reiterate that what I went through regarding the corridors for Plymouth and Warsaw earlier in the call, those are a preference. It's not a hard requirement if we can be convinced that there's something that's so much better than placing it within 1 mile of the heart of Plymouth and Warsaw, but we were really not looking to have these located in very rural and isolated areas along US 30 or outside of Marshall and Kosciuszko County. We have a couple questions, actually just one question about disadvantaged business enterprise goals. Can we get clarifications if the DBE goal has been defined for the RFP? I would refer you all to page 14 of the RFP where we provide a range of 1 to 4%. This DBE goal and our logic for developing it is currently under review by the Federal Highway Administration. So we cannot finalize it at this time, and it would be finalized as part of the negotiations and contract with the 1 or more successful respondents. And importantly, the DBE goal is proposed not to include the behind the meter utility upgrades. We went over that in our last pre-RFP meeting. So that is the lion's share of the total project cost, but that's not something, how that gets installed, the utility using subcontractors is not something that's under control of the contractor that we would select. So we have proposed to remove those behind the meter upgrades from the DBE goal. So that keep that in mind in your calculation and considering what you would need to do to meet or exceed those goals. We have some site-specific questions now about US 30. US 30 locations require NEVI compliance. Can you provide clarification on NEVI standards that we need to comply with for US 30? Do the sites need to be 1 mile from AFC US 30? Yes, they must be within 1 mile with the measurement requirements that are defined by the NEVI program and the NEVI guidance that's been provided by Federal Highway. This also includes the minimum of 4 ports capable of simultaneously providing 150 kW. There was some extended discussion here in this call about that 150 requirement. And we did some more research on the NEVI requirements and want to correct what we talked about last time. So if you had a station that was 180 kW, so the station itself can provide 180 kW, but 2 cars plug in and it splits it down to 90 each, that is not NEVI compliant. And that would not comply with MACOG's requirement that these stations be NEVI compliant. I'll look into this more, but if there's some way to program it and demonstrate that one of those ports would remain 150 and the second port would only take the power that's available above the 150, or as the other car plugs in and then drops, they would offload power to that second port, and that could be demonstrated. I would be fine with that as long as everything was clearly labeled and it was clear which of the ports. So if you had, this would require like 4 stations but 8 ports, and each station's up to 180, but they're all splitting to provide 8 parking spaces. You would need to clearly mark the 4 that would always be able to draw up to 150 and be NEVI compliant in that way. We can seek guidance on whether this kind of programming solution has been considered and approved as NEVI compliant. But for the airport, I would certainly be very open to considering that. And then we would need to confirm for US 30 if that's permissible. But if it's just an even split, no, that would be not NEVI compliant. And we provided documentation and references for the NEVI standards in our clarifications, our Q&A after our pre-proposal meetings. Any questions about that, just because we had some extended conversation? Seeing another question in the chat, John. Does the prime submitter have to be the GC? I assume that means general contractor. We would, money would only flow between MACOG and whoever the applicant is, the contractor. So in that way, yes, but the prime could be the site host and then competitively hire out the installation, have the design, have a design firm on board, et cetera, as long as that complied with federal procurement regulations. So that would be fine, but the money would all flow through MACOG, and then any bonding requirements or other requirements would still need to be met. That would be on the prime applicant or the contractor, not on one of the subcontractors to meet all program requirements. So hopefully that addresses that, John. If you have further clarifications, let me know. Another question sent directly, will these responses be published as an addendum? Yes, we definitely will be responding in writing to the new questions that are coming in, as well as the questions we received in advance. We'll try to get that posted as soon as we can here. And we will send out a notice by email. So that's why it's important to make sure your contact information is in the chat so we capture it. Although I did set up registration for Zoom this time, so you should be listed there. Someone asked, we are wondering if you already have a site in mind for Warsaw, or if all applications are submitted at once. Okay, the big question is basically, are all applications going to be considered at the same time equally, or is there a preference, or is there some application that will have more of an advantage because it's our preference? We are keeping a very open mind. I don't think I've reached out to any potential site hosts in Warsaw anytime recently. We don't have anyone that we're working with behind the scenes that we're hoping, is successful. We're just very much wanting to see any and all proposals and see which one is the most advantageous for the goals of the program and for utilization of the station. Yeah, that was, someone was asking a question just because they would like to apply, but they don't know if there's already someone that MACOG is working with. The answer is no. We are very much interested in knowing about any and all proposals. Okay, back to the advanced questions. For the two sites adjacent to US 30, would Michigan Power cover the cost of any required service upgrade? I believe this question, so Indiana Michigan Power is not going to be the utility along US 30, but it's asked, this question is fundamentally asking if utility side, supply side upgrades are included as part of the project costs. The answer is yes. However, the locations on US 30 have not been predefined by MACOG yet, so we can't speak specifically to the utility or what costs they might cover. That would need to be negotiated after the fact. For the airport, MACOG expects the contractor to engage directly with the utility, which in that case is Indiana Michigan Power, to refine the details about the utility upgrade costs after the initial notice of award. We have identified who that account manager is with I&M, and we've made initial contact to request additional information about transformer sizing and what's the maximum transformer size that could be accommodated without more extensive upgrades. We will share that information if we receive it before the application deadline. But we do expect the utility supply side upgrades to be included in the project scope, but we will not be scoring the South Bend project comparing the supply side cost estimates, because it is fixed based on the location that we chose. It's not anything that you as a respondent can control. So we're not going to evaluate you on your estimates of the supply side costs, because we don't expect you to reach out to Indiana Michigan Power for the airport location on your own and have those conversations. They would be duplicative. And I hope that makes sense, that it's in the scope, but you're not being scored against it, because that's set by the facts of what utility infrastructure is in place in the location that we chose. That came up and we discussed that as part of the site visit there as well. More site-specific questions for the airport. Can MACOG provide additional utilization rates for the given site at the airport? The answer is that MACOG does not have utilization rate projections for the proposed airport location. We also did provide information about the amount of traffic at the airport, just to give you an idea of the number of people moving through that area. We also will include the daily traffic volume, which is between 28 to 29,000 annual average daily traffic in the area of US 31, which is located about 2 miles, and including the interchange distance, it's located 2 miles from this location. And we'll provide a link to the traffic count database that MACOG hosts, so you can look that information up yourself. If you're trying to get a good idea of how many people are passing by, and the highway, the car wash, or the car rental company utilization, as well as the airport, and there's a South Shore Line train to Chicago that is co-located with the airport. So while those are fuzzy in terms of the exact number of people that would be passing by, I hope it gives you an idea about potential utilization. Let's see, we got a question about, will Indiana Michigan Power cover the cost of the second transformer required? This gets back to what I was saying a minute ago, that MACOG does expect the cost of the transformer to be included in the project budget, and it must be sufficient to provide at least 4 150 kW ports. And then, what is the target date for the construction of the additional small parking lot? In the photos that I shared, that parking lot's clearly just a patch of dirt that's been graded. That will be paved in the spring of 25 when the asphalt plants open. Unless someone has transformers that are in stock, we wouldn't anticipate that anyone would be trying to install the project sooner than that. So hopefully that timeline is acceptable. Spring of 2025 would be the earliest that construction on the charging stations could commence. I would plan no earlier than, well, we'll see what the weather is. I won't say anything more specific than that. Another additional question on are electronic and paper copies required to be submitted? Yes, please see the instructions on page 17 and 18 for the submission of both an electronic copy and the paper copies. That's because it is easier for our reviewers to look at all the materials in print. So we do require those 3 paper copies to be mailed or delivered to the office by the deadline. And then I have one last question here, which I'm going to flip back to screen share, but the question is about the site information, or Part C site proposal, clarifying the questions that apply to the airport. There are 40 points for that section. I'm going to flip back to that so you can actually see that. There we go. Previously, we said that some of these were not applicable for the airport because I just assumed we would go with 4 ports and 600 kW for the airport, but in discussions at the site visit, it was apparent that there might be interest in either future-proofing the transformer or actually starting with more than 4 ports, especially if there's power sharing or something. So we are asking that this section actually be filled out here in the site application, Part C. So we will be noting that in the addendum that we'll modify the application in that way, and we'll include the revised application, just a minor thing, but it won't factor into the score. So we won't be providing a better score to someone that says we want to install 6 ports than someone who meets the 4 ports. So you're not penalized by just sticking with the 4 at the South Bend airport location. But if that's important to have more ports in order for your own calculations of revenue or utilization, or just makes more sense in terms of maximizing the investment based on transformer sizing that you've chosen, feel free to install more ports and share that information as part of the application. But that won't affect the score for this location. Because it is not going to be a NEVI location. For US 31, it will not be a formal NEVI location, although we're asking it to be at least NEVI compliant in terms of power level availability. So hopefully that makes sense, that we are still requesting that information and that you may provide more than the NEVI minimum requirements, but it will not count for or against you if you provide for more ports and more power than the NEVI standards. So that's just a minor revision to the application for the airport location where previously this whole section was not applicable. Okay, I think we're ready for additional questions. I covered everything that was submitted in advance. Can you confirm if the EV chargers must be BABA compliant? Yes. The NEVI program and the CFI program require BABA compliance, and as I understand it, and as documented in the Q&A from the pre-proposal meeting, the BABA waiver has essentially passed because the chargers must have been manufactured, I believe it was by June 30th, and then we know that construction won't commence in October, so I see no way that, because there won't be a contract in place, there won't be any way that the existing waiver would apply to this project. If there are future waivers, we can look at whether that would apply. But if BABA phases in after the waiver expires, then we would expect BABA compliance since it's required as part of the CFI program and our grant agreement with Federal Highway. It looks like those are all the questions for now. Stop sharing my screen. 2:45, so we have a little bit of time left. I'm gonna allow for a few minutes of awkward silence, just in case anything I've said jogs another question. So I'll give at least 3 minutes, but if you would care to ask a question, it'll make it more comfortable for all of us. Also, importantly, this is your last opportunity to ask a very substantive question. So please take full advantage of that opportunity. I definitely appreciate all the questions we got in advance and all the questions asked today. Just a question about where the questions and answers will be posted. Kelsey, if you don't mind dropping in the chat that link to MACOG's procurement webpage. This is where all of our, actually I could share my screen and go there so you can see it, but we will include that information on the Engage website as well, your one-stop shop for all things MACOG CFI. So let's drop that link there again, but you can also always find procurement opportunities posted here, and I will show you all while we're waiting what that looks like, maybe. So this is MACOG's procurement webpage, and you can see right now we have the RFP as well as the addendum that was posted. So in order to see the responses to the South Bend International Site Visit, you need to click on that other one, and it goes through some pictures as well as some detail that I did not go through in this meeting, but information about the tax credits, how you can find information about that, the FAI requirements that the airport have a revenue sharing agreement, and some additional details about that. We got questions about bathrooms and porta potties. So definitely look at that question if that's something you've been wondering. Something that came up in the site visit as well was electric rates. So I linked to Indiana Michigan Power's electric rates for the airport. And then for the tariffs, there's a plug-in vehicle tariff that has a cap of 4,500 kilowatt hours a month. So think about the utilization that you project in the short term. And then there's a general service tariff, which includes, let's see, page 56. So I even provided a page number where you can go and look at that. But you would definitely have a conversation with the utility to confirm eligibility and the appropriate tariff and the implications of that for your project before proceeding and signing contract documents. But that's the background information you would need to know basically about the options. Something that I did not see asked, which I kind of expected to be asked, is about ADA accessibility guidelines. Currently, the U.S. Access Board has published guidelines, but there's now, I don't know if it's a request for information or actually a proposed ruling, but we expect the ADA requirements may be changing throughout the duration of the implementation of our CFI project. And so I'll include a link to that in the addendum where you can find those requirements, because some of them are more specific than what we've seen. Particularly of note are the how we define ADA accessibility and who can use the stations. So I believe the exception is 4 or less parking spaces. You don't have to sign the accessible space as with the blue sign and the blue symbol on the ground and the blue pavement markings. If it's 4 ports or less, if it's more than 4 ports, one of those would need to be a reserve space that other people couldn't use. There's also discussion around a use last model where it says use this last. It's designed to be accessible, but it certainly didn't seem to be settled, but that's something that could be changing your own evaluation of utilization and project costs. So keep that in mind, that those ADA requirements might change based compared to the current guidelines that are available during the implementation of this project. And we don't have any idea of the timeline, or I don't know. I have read every word of the document that was posted on the Federal Register, and I would encourage you all to do the same, but I'm not sure when that would go into effect, what the next steps are, and then the implementation. Let's see. Can we submit more than one location per city, or do we need to pick our best per city? That might be a James question and or a let me reread the RFP and get back to you question. I would prefer that you pick your best location instead of throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, but I don't know. What if there are 2 very, very compelling locations and site hosts that you have in mind? James, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we'll double check through the RFP just to make sure that we're not providing anything conflicting. But I think it's going to be incumbent upon you to provide enough information for all of these locations. And so I guess the ultimate question for all of you is, in order to provide your most competitive location, will you be realistically able to provide the detail necessary for multiple sites versus investing all of your time into being able to put your best foot forward at your best potential site? So, my advice would be that we are looking for the best locations. We do not have funding to say do a 4th, 5th, or 6th location at level 3 charging. And so really, we are looking for a geographic dispersion between Warsaw, between Plymouth, and then the South Bend location. So I would not foresee us doing, say, 2 locations in Warsaw versus, we are definitely looking for a location in Plymouth, in, on, or near Plymouth, and then in, on, or near Warsaw as well. So if the question is, can I submit 2 for Warsaw? We're still ultimately only going to select 1. Right. So hopefully that provides some context that we are looking for that geographic kind of impact to have one in Warsaw, one in Plymouth, and then one at the airport. But and then we want to make sure that your application is as competitive as possible. And so we would probably recommend putting your best alternative forward. But we'll double check to make sure that there's nothing conflicting in the RFP.
And it's not like there's an infinite universe of options either in these communities, but I could be convinced, and we'll confirm, I could be convinced that someone might want to apply for 2 locations that might be equally good with equally enthusiastic site hosts, perhaps, but we certainly don't want to blow up the number of applications that are of lower quality and lower amount of due diligence and commitment from site hosts because of just the sheer volume. So I wouldn't want to see more than 2 per community from a particular prime applicant or team. That's where I would be at personally, but we'll talk after and we'll confirm. Let's see, I'm getting a number of questions that have already been answered from someone who joined just a couple minutes ago. So I think we will, it's just asking, is the US 30 need to be NEVI compliant? Are there a minimum of 4 DCFC ports? We've answered all those questions. So the answer is yes and yes, but please see the recording that we will post after the meeting, as well as our written comments if you joined at the end of the meeting. So we have just 6 minutes left. Looks like someone else new just joined. So if anyone joined late, we are actually, if you thought this was Central Time, that might actually be what's happening. Everything MACOG does is on Eastern Time. So if you missed the meeting, we will share the recording after the fact. So
Additionally, we will have the official written comments posted and emailed out.
yes, and those written comments are the ones that you should rely on. You should not rely on something that I say that we later correct in writing. So while it may be helpful for the context in the presentation, definitely refer to the written addendum that we will release here shortly. So appreciate everyone's time, engagement, and attendance and interest in this project. And we're very excited to roll this out over the next months and years. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to close it out.